Hello there, Alan. Welcome back to another episode of Friends. My name is Generation Tech. So, in episode 3 of Skeleton Crew, spoiler alert, when Jedi Traveler Jad Na-Na-Wood arrives on the observatory moon to borrow the expertise of Kim, the archivist, to find the hidden legendary planet of Adnaten, the diminutive Al astronomer is sketched out by the fact the individual she likes to call Crimson Jack has a bunch of children in tow.
Go ahead.
It's him, all right. And he's got a flock of children. Must be kidnapped. Poor things. You've got to help them.
Remember, this is post-Order 66, and the Jedi Order's monopoly on Force-sensitive children has been shattered, which meant that it was no longer acceptable for a middle-aged space wizard to just pop in unannounced into a new mother's postpartum recovery room like the Kool-Aid Man and snatch up her child. The New Republic, which is now in charge of the galaxy, doesn't tolerate that kind of creepy nonsense. Although the chances of this guy being an actual Jedi are, slim to none.
I'll dispatch a patrol to make the arrest.
Good. I'll stall him as long as I can.
Now, during the Imperial era, when you had a magical predator in the proverbial white van in your neck of the woods, you would call the Imperial military hotline. They would probably end up scrambling anywhere from an Imperial-class Star Destroyer or, at a minimum, a Gazanti-class cruiser with a small complement of TIE fighters. And that's because the basic patrol craft used by the Empire for these types of situations is the TIE LN fighter. This thing is as bare bones as the Civic DX class back in the day. No power windows, manual transmission. In the TIE Fighter's case, this means no life support, no shields, and most importantly, no hyperdrive, which means no FTL speed travel. And so really the TIE Fighter's in-space superiority designation should be like local space superiority, because it doesn't travel far on its own. All TIE Fighters need a larger hyperdrive-equipped hub or carrier ship to allow them to be effective in remote parts of the galaxy, where maybe you don't have an Imperial garrison, like Kim's Observer Moon. This is basically the equivalent of police in our own world using giant tractor trailers to run the highways that deploy smaller motorcycles and squad cars to pursue criminals, like some post-apocalyptic Mad Max fleet. Yes, I do believe that public servants should be forced to occasionally huff spray paint. But this type of security response creates 3 problems. 1, it's excessive and unnecessarily expensive to maintain these larger carrier vehicles, in this case capital ships, like the very logistically intense Imperial-class Star Destroyer. 2nd, large hub ships are also very easy to evade. Rebel fighters often use the cityscape-like conning towers on these 1-mile-long battleships to hide from point defense weapons. And 3rd, with an Imperial carrier ship arriving on location, it still takes a while for the TIE fighters to detach or deploy. And in those key moments, the rebels can either escape or even set up an ambush while the TIE fighters are leaving their hangar. It's like picking up emotionally vulnerable chicks at a funeral. And so the Imperial Galactic Patrol strategy has always been financially unfeasible and tactically strategically problematic.
Before we continue, a quick word from our sponsor for today's video. Winter is coming, and as men enter our holiday hibernation stage, things can get pretty shaggy, especially by the time Christmas comes around. And I'm not just talking about our lumberjack beards and chest hair, I'm also talking about the boys. I call mine Popeye and Roy Rogers. Keeping your undergrowth nicely trimmed and sorted is the number one to make sure you're looking your best down there, either when you're with the ladies or streaking at a local sporting event. And there's no tool I would trust more around my precious sacks of manhood than Manscaped's Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. With a 7200 RPM motor, this thing purrs and is smooth. It features 2 interchangeable skin-safe blade heads, the skin-safe trimmer blade for precision, and the skin-safe foil blade for a close cut. I would demonstrate for you guys, but Manscaped said it was completely unnecessary. As a matter of fact, they stressed that point when they gave me feedback about this ad. Anyway, this is the modern age, guys. Embrace change. We men no longer have to use beard trimmers, scissors, or God forbid, a straight razor on our precious jewels. This thing even has an LED spotlight to help you see in the darkest of holes, illuminate things that have never been illuminated before.
This isn't just a shaving experience, guys. It's an adventure.
So what are you waiting for? Get your Performance Pack 5.0 Ultra from Manscaped. It also comes with a Weed Whacker 2.0 for nose and ear hairs and a free gift of Boxers 2.0 and Shed 2.0 carrying bag. Also, don't forget to use my promo code GTECH, that's all caps, and you'll get 20% off, plus free international shipping at checkout. Thank you for your patience, and do it for the boys.
Now, in the Skeleton Crew, when the New Republic Defense Forces respond to this Amber Alert call, they don't end up sending a cruiser, and that's because the New Republic is very much a continuation of the Rebel Alliance, just with a new coat of paint and amnesia over early war crimes and terrorist acts. Saw Gerrera was a goddamn freedom fighter. Anyway, the New Republic ends up sending a pair of T-65B X-wings to investigate the situation. This is the standard New Republic patrol formation, which we see quite a lot during this era. It's used to pull over Mando's sketchy-ass Razor Crest a few times, and another patrol was also sent in an attempt to stop Thrawn's return. It's actually kind of funny and also sad to see this iconic warbird basically turn into the Star Wars equivalent of a Crown Vic. Now, if you put the T-65B X-wing side by side with the TIE Fighter, it's clear that from a cost perspective, the TIE Fighter is far more economical. We're talking about a light interceptor designed for efficient mass production, supported by huge state subsidiaries, and also manufactured by one of the largest military-industrial complexes the galaxy has ever seen, which also probably uses free labor, aka slaves. This is a short-range, bare-bones fighter with a revolutionary twin-ion engine design that has no moving parts at all, making it one of the most reliable and also low-maintenance starfighters ever produced. This is versus a half-finished prototype concept starfighter that has probably way too many components and parts inside of it and features, and this is being manufactured in the Rebel Alliance's broke-ass network of underground factories, if you can even call them that. With an inefficient supply chain and almost non-existent logistical network, I'm surprised we didn't see a few X-wings with one panels or scrap metal bolted onto it. I mean, actually, at the Battle of Endor, there was an A-wing that had like Fujitsu wood panels on it, so that's not that far off. For your younger kids, the reference is basically that in the 80s, wood paneling was like the carbon fiber of its day, the epitome of luxury, a material that was so lightweight that it could easily turn your family station wagon into a speed wagon. The point is the X-Wing was just not efficiently built, wood paneling or not. It's not mass produced in any way, and so its cost per unit is pretty high, and also there needs to be constant maintenance because of production errors and production variations. This was also, as mentioned, a prototype, so it wasn't exactly battlefield stress tested or tested at all. A lot of Rebel fighter models were basically being modified and tested throughout the entire conflict. These are some pretty big negatives for the X-Wing, and ultimately this X-Wing costs around 150,000 credits, almost 3 times the cost of a TIE LN fighter at 60,000 credits. But that doesn't necessarily make the X-Wing patrol less cost efficient. The New Republic deploys 2 T-65B X-Wings on most calls. It's about 300,000 credits worth of hardware. The Empire could technically field 5 TIE fighters with that same budget, but remember, no hyperdrive means that they have to deploy, at minimum, 1 Gazanti-class cruiser, which are essentially rebadged civilian Corellian freighters. This is a pretty cheap solution. I mean, these 65.8-meter-long vessels cost the Empire roughly 200,000 credits. So technically, a Gazanti-class cruiser with 2 TIE fighters is about the same cost as New Republic patrol of 2 X-Wings. Although it should be mentioned that the Gazanti-class cruiser usually carried around 4 TIE fighters. But what you're not seeing is the larger crew on board the Gazanti, which needs to be trained, fed, and clothed. We're talking about a minimum of a pilot, a co-pilot, a captain, comms operator, sensors operator, an engineering crew, loading bay crew, and usually onboard security as well. And so even if Imperial TIE fighters are more efficient than their X-Wing counterparts, the Empire is still bringing like 20 to 40 guys on every one of these missions, and the New Republic can do it with just 2 pilots. That's efficiency. And so even if the X-Wing spends twice as much time in the maintenance hangars, even if Carson Teva spends twice as much time at Galactic Donuts filling his beard with sprinkles, it doesn't really matter. I'll take 2 Carson Tevas in that frumpy, ridiculous orange flight suit over an entire wing of TIE fighters, not only because that man is a fucking legend and single-handedly keeping the New Republic together. I'm always going to take the starfighter that I know that I can guarantee will make it to the location in one piece. I don't care if the Empire has 100 TIE fighters without hyperdrives to get them where I need them. They just don't exist in my reality. We used to have this saying in video production that the best camera is actually the camera you have on you that can actually capture what you're looking at. Sometimes that's just an iPhone. And so it's the same principle here. The X-Wing is more expensive than the TIE fighter, more costly to maintain, but it's a much more practical and flexible design, and so it ultimately saves the New Republic a lot more money on patrols. Especially in the Outer Rim, where oftentimes 2 X-Wings is more than enough. These snuff fighters were equipped with life support and food, capable of operating independently for several days. They had a Class 1.0 hyperdrive that outpaced every legal civilian starship in the galaxy. Heavy emphasis on legal. With its 4 fuel engines and S-foil heat dispersion system, an X-Wing, especially in combat mode, could keep up with like 95% of the fastest sublight speed vessels in the the galaxy, and it could also win a turning war with most of the cobbled-together fighters that the pirates and bandits generally flew around in. Equipped with both lasers and proton torpedoes, they could easily pose a threat to freighters and even challenge much larger vessels like corvettes or even frigate-class starships. I mean, if you think about it, Luke Skywalker took out the first Death Star with a single X-wing. Wedge Antilles helped take down the second Death Star with an X-wing, and Poe Dameron took out an entire moon with an upgraded version of the T-65B X-wing. And so I would argue that 99% of the time the X-wing is enough. And by deploying the X-wing en masse, the Rebel Alliance was able to save a lot on their military expenses, and that makes securing the Outer Rim not only feasible, but a good idea. Of course, the New Republic's political will and policies are a whole different matter for a whole different video, because even if the New Republic had the right tools and the right personnel to do these jobs, its leadership was just utterly trash, and also had a lot of problems in focusing on what they wanted to do. And of course, that can derail any type of military operation you're trying to carry out. Now, when a single X-wing isn't enough because, say, some patrolman stumbles across the pirate haven at Port Borgo, they could call for backup in the form of more X-wings. And because X-wings are hyperdrive equipped, they don't actually need carrier ships, which means you can deploy them very easily. For instance, this allowed the rebels to operate several planetside bases at the sector level that could deploy starfighters to nearby systems almost instantaneously. When you have a planetside base, it's just going to be a lot cheaper than maintaining some kind of carrier ship in deep space. And you can also basically supply these bases and employ locals and local products, which is good because it builds that kind of connection between the New Republic military and the local populace. Those things really do matter in the long term. People like to see their government taxpayer money being used properly. Take Adelphi Base, for instance. Cue What It's Worth by Buffalo Springfield. It's really not fancy. A few prefab tents and hangars set up around a squadron of snub fighters because, again, the huge gap between military starships and civilian ones means that you'd kind of be stupid to attack a local system with something like Adelphi Base set up in it. This was a great deterrent. Adelphi Base was really the most bare-bones type of outpost too, located in a very sparsely populated area. You can easily scale up this model for more busy systems. Now, despite Mon Mothma and the New Republic's desire to demilitarize the galaxy and transfer all federal military assets to local defense forces, Mon Mothma wasn't a fool. She wasn't stupid enough to just completely disband the New Republic Navy overnight. She actually had a plan, a more methodical process that was done in different stages, making sure along the way that the security needs of the galaxy were still met while slowly transitioning from more, planet power, military power, and planet security. Therefore, a few years after the Galactic Civil War ended, there still were contracts for new starships, and the creation of new designs and research of advanced starship technology continued. This would lead to the Defender-class cruiser, a mid-sized Mon Calamari shipyard capital ship that was heavily used by the New Republic. It's probably comparable to the Nebulon B escort frigate used by the Empire in systems where the Imperial-class Star Destroyer was just too big and unnecessary, which is basically like most systems. The Defender was a few hundred meters long, at least 3 times longer and larger than the CR-90 Corvette that made up the backbone of the Rebel Alliance Navy during the war. And if you take a look at the design of this ship, you can really quickly figure out what the New Republic Navy's doctrine was all about. They were going back to the days when snub fighters were the core of the military strategy, just like the old Republic Navy. The Defender's most interesting feature is the fact that it has 4 individually contained hangars, so that if one gets knocked out or damaged, it's still possible for the ship to recover and launch fighters in other hangars. Other than the Venator-class Star Destroyer, the Defender-class cruiser is probably one of the most snub fighter-friendly starships of its period. This ship really is the backbone of a very capable and cost-efficient Republic military force, perfect for doing the job that the Imperial military was supposedly designed for. I mean, let's be honest, as cool as the Imperial military did look, unless Palpatine was facing some Warhammer 40k level type threat, it was completely unnecessary and over the top. Although in Legends you did have Yuzang Bong, so I always liked that theory that Palpatine had created this military to fight them, but that no longer is a thing now. The Empire was actually battling a conflict mostly caused by a cost of living crisis, economic decline, and just terribly draconian security laws. What the Empire needed was political and economic reform and a more liberal society, not one that basically turned people into slaves, working in the industrial military complex. And so it's really not surprising that the non-autocratic government system is going to have the more efficient and reasonable military doctrine and design. As if we take a look at the gross excesses and inefficiency of the Imperial military, the majority of the blame can be placed on Emperor Palpatine's shoulders. Here was an individual so afraid of opposition that he essentially destroyed the various institutions and experts that could have designed him a far more efficient military force, and replaced them with a bunch of goons and morons, individuals who were loyal to Palpatine but also not a huge threat to his power because they were just not very capable. A capable leader surrounds himself with friends who aren't loyal because of fear or personal ambition, but because they actually respect that individual. A true leader surrounds himself with individuals that challenge him, individuals with a diversity of beliefs and backgrounds so that all angles are covered. Without checks and balances, Palpatine is isolated and alone, and so there's no one to tell him that building a moon-sized Death Star with essentially a bunch of political dissidents sprinkled in at every phase of the design and construction was a completely terrible idea. And that's why even though the New Republic's political system was gridlocked and lacked coherence, the New Republic Defense Force was still better than the Empire in a lot of ways. The tools it had at its disposal were far more efficient and capable of doing the job they needed it to. The real downfall of the New Republic wasn't its X-wings or capable cruisers, it was political infighting and neo-imperialists who were openly supporting the First Order from within. There's also people in Costco who don't return their shopping carts back to the corral. A clear sign that the social construct which has nurtured civilization in the galaxy for tens of thousands of years are finally started breaking down. Also, the removal of the Supreme Pizza with multiple toppings was a huge hit to the average middle-class family as it was a staple in their diets. Then, of course, we have the chicken bakes de-evolution when it comes to packaging. Now it's just in a brown paper sack. What happened to those aluminum foil wraps that used to keep those things nice and toasty until we got home? We used to be a proper country. We used to be